Effects offer a way to create visual appearances that are editable at any time. The Appearance panel is where effects are applied and where all of the magic happens as well. Let's explore effects and how they can be adjusted using the Appearance panel. Now, I'm beginning this video with the pluralist.ai file already open on my computer. And I'm on the first artboard in this document because I wanted to show you the traditional method of creating the appearance that we see here. So what I can do is I can click on this, and you'll notice that when I do, there's a lot of components that make up this artwork. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click, and you'll be able to see, if you zoom in, I'm going to go ahead and go into outline mode, just so we can see that there are a ton of objects that are basically stacked on top of one another that are creating this appearance. If I go to View and choose Preview, you can see that as I hover over them, it's highlighting all these individual elements. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, there's not an inherent problem with it. The artwork will still output okay, and it looks good. The issue that we run into is if we need to adjust it. So if somebody had come back to us and said, you know, we like this pluralist logo, but can you make the shadow a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller? It's going to take a little bit of work, especially if I need to make it bigger. If I want to make it smaller, I could delete some of these items. But if I want to make it bigger, I have to figure out, well, how far did we move it? And so on and so forth. That's where effects come into play. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the Artboards panel, and I'm going to double click on the blue Pluralist logo copy artboard. And if I click on this, we can see that this is a group of elements. And I'm going to double click on one of these letters in the word pluralist to just isolate. I'm going to go into isolation mode. And now when I click on this, I only have that group selected. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the Appearance panel. And the Appearance panel's job is to show us all of the properties of the selected element. So with this item selected, it's telling me that I have no stroke applied to this artwork. There is a fill of blue, standard default opacity, and that's pretty much it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this Appearance panel to my advantage to efficiently create the same shadow that we saw in the first artboard. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the panel menu, and I'm going to choose Add New Fill. And if you look at this, you can see that we now have two fills. Now, does that mean I have two objects? Well, if I drag this, it's still one object. And you can see that they're both blue. Now, just for organizational purposes, I'm going to go ahead and drag this fill down a little bit so that they're both right on top of one another. And the fills that we're seeing here are just like in the Layers panel and just like your stacking order. You know, this particular fill is on top of this fill. For example, if I click on, let's click on the bottom fill, and if I make this color red, we can't really see a change in the artwork because this fill is underneath this fill. Now if I change this one, you will definitely see the change. So I'm going to set these both back to blue. There we go. Now with the bottommost fill selected, however, I'm going to come up here to the Effect menu. And the job of the Effect menu is to apply effects to our artwork in a non-destructive and editable way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Distort and Transform, and I'm going to choose Transform. And that's going to bring up my Transform dialog box. I'm going to turn my preview on. And in the Move field, I'm going to move this fill, the second fill, mind you. Let's go with 0.05 points in the horizontal and vertical direction. Now, we're not really seeing a change right now. Let's see. If we move this like 100 points, we'll be able to see, you know, exactly what's happening. Actually, let's move it like 30 points, and you'll see that it's basically shifting that one fill. Cool. Now, what I'm going to do is change it back to 0.05 points and do a very small distance. But then down here in the Copies field, I'm going to go ahead and type, let's go with 60. And when I hit the Tab key, you're going to see that it's taking that one fill and transforming it and making 60 copies as an effect. And this is an important concept to understand. This is an effect. It's not really creating 60 objects for me to click on. It's creating this effect of the same principle of duplicating those 60 objects. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click OK. And in this bottom fill, I'm just going to make sure that I have it selected. And I'm going to go up to the color panel. And because this is a spot color, I can just change this to a tint value of that spot color. So I'm going to change this to 50% and hit the Tab key. And you'll see that I now have this lightened version of the drop shadow. Now, once again, I can double click on this all day to go into isolation mode, but I'm never going to get to those objects, that shadow that we have. And that's because it's applied as an effect. How do I know that? Well, let's just back up the truck for a second. And I'm going to click on, let's go back one more. I'm going to click on this group. And if we go to the Appearance panel, we can see that this fill, sometimes it'll be collapsed and you won't be able to see it. But if you expand this, this fill has an effect applied of transform. What are the values? Well, if you click on that, it's going to take you right back to the setting that you used to create it. So if somebody came to you and said, you know what, the shadow's too big or too small, let's say I want it to be a little bit bigger, I can change the number of copies to 75, and when I turn on the preview, it's just going to tweak that shadow and adjust it accordingly. I can experiment to my heart's content in here. If I say, I still don't like that, let's go back to 60, I make an adjustment, click OK, and the job is done. So the Appearance panel is really where the hub or the control is located for all the visual components of your artwork. As you can see, by using this Appearance panel, you have great flexibility with effects, and they can be easily edited at any given point in time.